In today's episode of The Motherless Shift, we dive deep into a raw and transformative conversation about trauma, resilience, and the unbreakable human spirit. Our guest shares an extraordinary journey of survival, growing up in a challenging environment where self-reliance wasn't just a choice, it was a necessity. From navigating a home with absent and struggling parents to becoming an accomplished professional and intentional mother, this story is about more than overcoming obstacles. It's about breaking generational cycles, finding healing through therapy, and creating a different path for the next generation. Prepare to be inspired by a conversation that explores the complex mother-daughter dynamic, the power of education as an escape, and the incredible strength of the human heart. This is a conversation about turning pain into purpose and discovering that our past does not define our future. Beetle, wherever you want to start, if you don't mind, share as much as you are comfortable with sharing about who you are, where you're from, your childhood, and just give us a little background about yourself before we jump straight into the conversation.
Okay. Let me see how I can, because you know how I am. I'm very cautious about my personal space.
Yeah.
And I am doing this because I do know that there are other people out there like myself. And I've also, through the years, have found solace in being able to hear other people's stories and understand where they come from and realize, oh, okay, I'm not the only one. So, yeah, so I am from a, I would say, one of the more problematic areas in the nation when it comes to those of us of color. Poor background, uh, broken home, the norm, father not in the picture, um, lots of substances around, and from a very young age, just me being what I always called a dark mushroom in a cold corner, right? Just feeling like you're just looking at things from afar and you're molding in this space in the corner with no one coming to pluck you and, slice you and saute you up or do anything with you, just leaving you there to just figure it out. So, um, I've always been, and I thank God for this. Oh my gosh. And I tell everybody I am God's child. I can't in any way, shape, or form think of it in any other term, because I can be in so many different places, but from a very young age, um, I just was responsible. I was responsible, and I didn't know at a young age that I was this person. But as I became an adult, and I reach out to people to include, my mom's neighbors or people that are her age, and like, oh, you've always were such a sweetheart, and
Mhm.
one of my neighbors, one of my classmates, I learned he had passed maybe about 2 years ago. And I reached out to his father because I knew his wife had passed previous, and that was his only child. And she passed long before I even left the area where I grew up. And the first thing he kept saying was, oh, you were just the sweetest, kindest child ever. You would just sit on the porch and play by yourself. And, you didn't need much and you didn't ask for much. But, I think those were sort of forced compliance sort of things. I didn't need much because I didn't have much.
Mhm.
I didn't ask for anything because I knew I wasn't going to get it. So I just kind of learned how to be, I can't even say happy, but be content in my space by myself,
Mhm.
um, as a child, as a young child. And again, didn't know how to even process feelings because no one taught me that. No one taught me anything, quite frankly. And I think my motto is that I've raised myself from the time I came out of the womb, even though there was a mom in the house.
Right.
That mom's time and efforts and energy was not dedicated towards me. I had two other siblings, one older and then one um a couple of years younger than me, whom I both lost. One at an early age, he was 15, um, to murder, and then my oldest one overdosed from the typical fentanyl laced heroin here in 2015. So, but either way, my brother that was older, he commandeered, shall I say, all of her time, whether she wanted to or not. That's where her focus was. And the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and he was a squeaky
Yeah.
wheel, and I wasn't, and I never was. So yeah. So I think that's about it. So I've kind of been flying solo all my life, unfortunately, which
Mhm.
hasn't really, in some respects, it's caused some caused me to have to develop some qualities that
Mm.
are wonderful, but obviously there's that other half of it as well, where it's been detrimental as well.
Right.
To my emotional development, mental health, et cetera, et cetera. So, but nevertheless, I still keep a positive outlook and still try to just continue to try to be the best that I can be,
Mhm.
and have the greatest life I can provide for my children. So yeah.
So, of your parents, there was a total of 4 children. Is that correct to say?
There was 3 whom I shared the same parents with, and
Okay.
then I have 2 half siblings from my father, but, we don't have really a relationship. I know of them, but they're never in my life per se. I didn't understand until I was older, uh, late middle school, early high school, that the older one was my sister,
Okay.
and it just wasn't something that, you know, we weren't put in each other's environments as children, which, and my philosophy is this: children have nothing to do with the decisions that the parents make, right? And so I don't think
So
children should
true.
be penalized
Mhm.
because, my father had children by other women. That's not my fault. It's not that those other kids' faults. And there's no
Right.
reason why we shouldn't have had a relationship or a close relationship. But again, that's what people do. And so my other half sibling, I was very close with her mother. So she was, and it's ironic because my half sibling that's older is exactly the same age as my older brother, and
Mhm.
the half sister that's younger is pretty much the same age as my youngest brother. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and so, but
So
again, I
your
mean,
father essentially had 2 families at the same time?
I guess, I mean, again, he was never around us, so
Okay. Okay.
again, couldn't even remotely tell you what he was doing at any given time.
Mm.
Um, and I will tell you, my father was a piss poor father, but even through that, he was fun to be around. Um, he was, how do I want to say? He could just figure things out. And I have to tell you, everybody in my family is like, "Oh my gosh, you are just like him."
Mhm.
Um, so from a person perspective, I could tolerate him, right?
Right.
And I could tolerate him because he was honest. He just said what needed or felt he needed to say, whether
Mm.
it was good, bad, or indifferent. And as you know, I like consistency, you know?
Right.
I don't care which end of the spectrum you're on, as long as you're consistent, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
So even him telling me at 15, you were a mistake, don't you, out of the blue, as I'm visiting my grandfather. Okay, what am I supposed to do with that? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But he was honest. I mean, that's what he felt he needed to say. And unfortunately, um, it just was not in the interest of my what I want to say. It wasn't in my favor, you know what I'm saying? For
Right.
no fault of my own whatsoever. So yeah, yeah.
So, if I were to ask, what did you observe about the dynamic between your parents? Do you have a frame of reference?
It was only abuse. When he was in the space, and I say when he was in our space because like I said, I never recalled him ever staying. Like he may have stayed overnight, but 9 times out of 10, he was drunk.
Mhm.
10 times out of 10, he was abusing my mother.
Mhm.
Um, and in a bad way, obviously, very physically abusive. And then and then there was nothing, and then he was just not there, you know. And I can't say, I want to say, and this is just me guessing,
Mm-hmm.
maybe up to the point that I was maybe 4.5, 5. I remember him in and out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, that was it. He never really came by. We never really saw him. And my family had, at least his side, meaning him, his brother, my grandfather, they had a little small garage in our community. But I would always see my uncle and my grandfather there, but rarely ever saw my father.
Mm-hmm.
If I saw him, it was typically when he was living with my grandfather in the city that we grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
And once in a hairy blue moon, I would go up and just kind of see my grandfather, catch the bus, because we didn't have a car. And he would be there, you know.
Yeah.
But there was never any him putting himself in my space at all, saying anything nice, supporting me in any way, nothing, or none of us to that matter, So yeah, so there really wasn't. And I think and I don't know this particularly, but he sucked a lot of energy and pride and a lot out of my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I had talked to my aunt, meaning my father's sister. She had passed when was it? April? Just recently passed, and was talking to her best friend who knew my mother, and there were parts of I just didn't know my mother. I really
Yeah.
did not know my mother. And so she was like, yeah, I used to ride the bus with her, and she dressed so sharply and she was so nice and da 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 da. And even this lady was like, I had just I was so angry with your father because he sucked the life out of her. He really did, because the mother I grew up with was the
Mm-hmm.
one who would wear my brother's clothes. That was, they were frumpy, they were old, they were, you know what I mean? She didn't care
Yeah.
for herself really. Um, and she was exhausted, and again, once I reached the age of maturity, and I tell people that's different for each person. It could be 12 for one person, it can be 60 for somebody else. But once
Mm-hmm.
I started to reach the age of maturity, and that came with a lot of work as well,
Mm-hmm.
um, I realized that she was struggling. She was
Yeah.
dealing with some issues because she too was a product. She was a product of an affair. So she didn't live with her mother or her father.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so I'm sure she had some self-worth issues.
Right.
And it didn't help that I had a problematic older brother
Mm-hmm.
that once
That took
again,
all of her time and attention.
yep, like my father just sucked the energy out of her. Um, yeah, so she had nothing to give me. And I say she had nothing to give me. I mean, the few little tiny things I may have asked for, um, she could have, but for whatever reason, did not, And it was, can I get some school pictures? I don't have
Mm-hmm.
the money. Ask your grandfather. I don't where I can see her sending packages of crisp white t-shirts and these see-through televisions and whatever else he needed to jail for my older brother, right? So I
Right.
see that you have the capacity, and I see that you have the energy, and you can ask someone for a ride to, whether he was in juvie or jail or whatever,
Right.
penitentiary, you can find ways to do that. But for whatever reason, for me, it just wasn't there. And I think, my history at school, there were plenty of opportunities for somebody to
Right.
show up at any given point, and no one ever did.
Yeah. You essentially went to school in your backyard. So let me ask.
Well, and not only, yeah, and not only in my backyard, but and when I say my history, I was a volleyball, basketball, softball, lacrosse recruit. I mean, I had row one, seat one in high school because I had all scholarships in that, plus, academic scholarships, Future Business Leaders of America, National Honor Society, captain of the varsity athletic club. You know what I mean? And when in my mind, I mean, at any given point, someone could have showed up, someone could have peeked their head through the door, but not ever once in my educational career did that ever happen. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And so, so that became very problematic for me to try to resolve, because normally you go to counseling and what do they say? oh, well, you have to put yourself in the shoes of your parents. And understand that they probably couldn't or didn't. And I'm like, yeah, but she could. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And out of maybe the 10 times that you did something for him, could you at least do something for me once? You
Right.
know? And it just never happened. So
Do you remember having any kind of conversations with your mom or even an explanation after, some of the abuse? Like after the abuse would happen, would she say anything to you or your siblings, or how would that how would that end up?
it wouldn't end up. It would end up with her drinking or her, you know, doing what they do to cover a problem with a substance. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? No, we didn't have, Kim, we didn't have conversations. We didn't have talks. We didn't have hugs. We didn't have touches. We didn't have I love yous. We didn't have I'm proud of you. We didn't have any of that. None of
Like
that
you're
happened.
just
It
on
just,
cruise control in your home up until the point that you left and went to college. Like,
yes,
was there
ma'am.
any chores, any responsibilities that were shared, any expectations? I mean, paint that picture. It's sounding like you didn't have any kind of communication at all with your mom. And she was primarily the one in the house, right?
Yeah, she was the only one in the house. I mean,
Okay.
she worked again. And so one of the things I can say, and this is, I was talking to someone the other day about the welfare system. I said, I'm not opposed to the welfare system. I said, I'm opposed to people who abuse the welfare system and don't try to get a job or try to do whatever. Now, if you have a um, disability and you can't, I understand that. But one thing I will tell you is my mother always looked for a job. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there were times where she did work, they were normally labor type jobs, blue collar type things, but she always looked for a job. And when she couldn't, we were on welfare, and often she couldn't. She was just a high school graduate. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, I was on cruise control. And I will say, hmm, I say purposely, but back then I didn't, my mind wasn't like, oh, I need to consciously stay out of this house. I need to stay out of this house.
So,
Um,
Beetle, let me slow you down for 1 second. I'm sorry.
yeah.
I'm just thinking from a parent standpoint, the amount of involvement that I had to have to get my kids, prepared for the first day of school. They got to be enrolled. They got to have shop records. They got to have certain documents, certain days that I had to show up at school. There were certain things that I needed. I needed an instrument. I needed some notebooks. I mean, what what was that? How did you make these happen? How did you even know? Okay, I got to go to bed. I got to get up in the morning. I got to get from point A to point B.
Hmm.
No guidance there.
Listen, listen. It's funny you said that. I showed my daughter a picture of my, I think it was middle school yearbook. And let me help
Uh-huh.
you understand, right? So there were no pictures of me. There were pictures of my two brothers.
Mhm.
Um, and so I didn't have any kind of high school, what do you call it, like middle school books, or pictures of me when I was in, the one picture of you in those little bell bottoms with the non-matching polyester top,
Yeah.
and all the other classmates with the teachers on either end. I didn't have any of that kind of stuff. And so
Uh,
I actually spent, and it has been, let me see, probably about 6 years ago. I spent some time because it is me trying to find myself, me trying to just kind of, like I said, be the best person I can be. Go get that little beetle and bring her to me and tell
Right.
her she's safe, right? And
Yeah.
so I was calling some of my family members who, did have cameras because their families could afford cameras. Like, hey, if you have any pictures of me, can you please send us some, send me some? And I
Wow.
got a couple of tricklings there. A picture of me and my brother on the porch and our little suit. And we had to be maybe 7 at the time, but I had no pictures. And so I went on eBay also, and I would periodically go on eBay and look for yearbooks from my middle school and my high school. And I was
Mhm.
able, because just so I can see what the hell did I look like, you know?
Wow.
Um, yeah. And so I go and I found one from I found one from middle school. And you've
Hmm.
met my daughter, right?
Yes.
She's very mature, very smart. She's witty. I love the chick. Okay.
Wow.
And so she looked at that photo and she laughed so hard. Have you seen The Incredibles? Where
Yes.
yeah, okay. You know Dash, when he runs, his hair is just like straight back.
Yeah. And I think you showed
Yeah.
me that picture.
Yes.
It's gorgeous. I love it.
He's
I love young Beetle.
to this day, to this day, she will tease me about that picture. But I had to tell her, and she was like, Mom, who, and the shirt was just kind of wacky looking. It was like, she's like, who let you go to school like that? I was like, my mother didn't give a shit about how I went anywhere.
Yeah.
And I did my own hair there in middle school, and clearly I did not do a good job, and it was damaged. And even when I was 16, my aunt did. She came and took me down to visit to stay a little bit with my great grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you what, all of the stuff I had, she cut my hair down to just nothing. I mean, I had a boy haircut, and my hair was so damaged. I had underwear that barely, most of the material was not attached to the actual elastic, the waist.
Oh
You
my.
know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's just my, no one cared. No one cared. Nobody paid attention to me. And when you say, did I have responsibilities? Did I have to clean? Did I have to do this? That's the thing. I was a sweet child. I was a very kind little girl, and I didn't have much. And so what I did have, I kept it very neat. So there was someone in the neighborhood who had given me a little dresser.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I had found this little long little doily that looks like almost like a mini table runner.
Mm-hmm.
And so all I had was my dresser and my doily. And then there was another lady in the neighborhood. And these are all adult ladies, like my
Mm-hmm.
mother's age or whatever. And don't get me wrong, everyone in the neighborhood knew our situation. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember she had a little ball of gold chains. They were thin gold chains, but they were all bundled up, and it's hard to get apart. And she asked me if I could, she said, you could have these if you want, if you can get them apart. And I did. And I sat there meticulously because
Mm-hmm.
gold chains, are you kidding me? You know what I mean? There's no, and that's one of the things that I would ask my mother for Christmas, for my
Mm-hmm.
birthday, for I just want a gold chain, just a small gold chain. Then of course, there was maybe two or three holidays where it was nothing. And then she gave me one, and it was fake, you know what I mean? Because it would
Uh-huh.
turn colors. And then I just stopped asking, and so then and so I would have my gold chains lined neatly out on my doily, on my dresser.
Yeah.
And as far as the house is concerned, Kim, I couldn't keep that house clean because it wasn't a clean home.
Yeah.
Like, I would do dishes if I thought the dishes needed to be done, but most of the time I was not in the home. I played a sport, and once I started playing sports, and when I wasn't playing a sport, I was outside playing. Like, I just stayed outside on those little metal roller skates. I'll give
Yeah.
one person to have one skate, and I have the other skate, and we're kind of skateboarding on skates through the neighborhood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or just sitting on the porch. And again, I knew I didn't like where I was, but I had no idea on how unhappy I was. And this was after like 2014. One of my older cousins, she's just slightly younger than my mother, I guess. She was like,
Mm-hmm.
I remember we came to visit you all. And this was when we were little, clearly, because she said, your father was at the house. We went to visit your uncle. So we lived one court away from my uncle. And my uncle, same thing. Two
Mm-hmm.
boys and a girl. He was married, but they were educated. And so, most of the family came to see them. They're the one, they would go down to the country and see our family most of the time. They had cars, they had, yada yada. And
Mm-hmm.
so she's like, yeah, we were going to go see your father after we left your uncle's house, and we were leaving your house. I was walking down the steps, and it was just three steps. You go down and you get on the pavement and walk out the court or whatever. And she
Mm-hmm.
said, and you were just sitting there with your knees, your elbows on your knees, and your face in your fists. And you didn't look up, and you just said, I hate it here. I hate it. I can't wait to leave here. I hate it here. Oh, I was like, oh wow. And she said, you couldn't have been more than five. And I said, okay. I said, you know what? Thank you for that. I said,
Yeah.
because it just helps me understand how long I was unhappy there. Um,
That was at 5, though.
that's my point.
Like you
That's
had
my
12
point.
more years, 11, 12 more
Huh.
years in the house.
which is why
Interesting.
I don't care to go back to that. I don't go back there. I don't. But you know why? Because I don't have to. Um, and it's not a great place for me. It can be triggering for me. I did have to go back for a funeral. And I had to make sure I made this funeral. And this was she's a cousin of mine, but she knew my father well. They were like best friends, right?
Hmm.
And so I don't even remember when we became so close, but it was certainly once I became more of an adult, you know. It wasn't in high school, I can tell you that. Maybe mid-college because she would kind of support some of my college stuff, and then we
Hmm.
kept in touch. And I will say, even from her, I often heard from her, I just always felt so bad for you. She's like, you just never were treated the way you deserve to be treated. I just always was sad for you, you
Now, is
know.
this your aunt or your mom's friend?
No, this is my father's cousin
Okay.
on my father's side. So she's
Okay.
related to me on my father's side. And then when she passed, because she's one of the closest relatives, and when I say closest, she is the one who was most consistent in my life.
Yeah.
Once we became close, she would call, I would call, we would talk about things, yada yada. She
What
knew
from what age
probably the
to what
most.
age? I'm just curious. Do you know roughly?
And that's what I'm saying. I want to say when I was in college
Hmm.
is when we sort of started to develop, because again, once I went to college, she would keep in touch with me, you
Hmm.
know, and then also once I graduated from college, I lived in an area where her mother's family was from. So she would come down there, and of course she would come stay with me, or she would come visit, or I'm in the area. And unfortunately, a lot of my family did not a lot, most of my family did not do that.
Hmm.
To this day, there's people who have never seen the inside of my house, the
Yeah.
majority of my family. You know what I mean? Um,
I'm just, my heart is broken thinking, I mean, as a girl becoming a young lady and
mm,
then a woman, our bodies transform. There's things we need. I'm just, these are self-taught. Did you have anyone to reach out to, like when it was your period started coming or your boobies started coming in, or, like that was it? It was just all on your resourcefulness to figure these things out?
so I will say this. I did have an aunt on my mother's side, and I just so happened to come on my first time when I was at her house. And she basically just gave me a pad and told me how to put it on, and that was it. It wasn't like, yeah, that was pretty much it. No, there was not any female. My mother didn't teach me anything about being a woman at all, at all. I would say I would have to give that to my father's sister,
Mhm.
who again, she wasn't close in our lives. And when I say our lives, she wasn't close in my siblings' lives. Now, my uncle, and like I
Mhm.
said, he literally lived right around the corner from us. They were close. It seems like, everybody would gravitate to going to see them, or, if they were passing through, they would go see them. They would never really come see us. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, but either way, I remember her coming through when we were young a few times through the house. But when I became a high schooler, I want to say maybe my sophomore year, definitely my junior and senior year,
Mhm.
she had moved up to New York. Now, mind you, um, and it's funny because my grandfather had two boys and a girl. My father had two boys and a girl. My uncle had two boys and a girl, right? So however, my aunt was very spoiled. She was spoiled. She had a car. She went to a HBCU. She had the nice clothes and fashionable and this and that. Like, she was just, how do I want to say? I almost worshiped the idea of her when I was young,
Yeah.
because when she would walk into my space, she was so different and unattainable. Like, that was like, like, uh, here's the deal. When I went to school one day, and I remember my mother used to try to hold this against me. I was in middle school, and they had, you had to put your name on the little yellow name card with the blue lines when you're in like elementary school or
Uh-huh.
middle school. And they said, okay, write your names down. I wrote her name as my name. Yes, I did. I did. I mean, she just was fabulous, right? This is like, I was like, who is this chick? And I knew she was my aunt, but I'm like, wow, just in awe with her, right?
Right.
And then so she started, she moved up to New York, she got a job. And so in the summers, she started having me come up to New York with her. Now, mind you, because she wasn't in my space a lot, I didn't know really a lot about her. I knew
Yeah.
her, I knew she was my aunt, yada, 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 but I didn't know her as a person. Um, and what I realized is she was very, because she was so spoiled and she pretty much got whatever she wanted. It was kind of like me, you know?
Right.
All almost like if it's not about me, then you need to be gone. So, but anyway, the first summer was wonderful because here you go. I have an opportunity to go out of this ugly space that I'm in, this dark space
Mm-hmm.
that I don't like, you know. Um and I went up to New York and I loved it. I mean, when I
Mm-hmm.
say loved it, that person that I thought I should have been kind of came out, you know.
Right.
I'm getting on the number 2 train going down to Manhattan. I'm in Central Park. I'm roller skating. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, I'm running into what's his name? Al Pacino walking his little German Shepherd dog. And my uncle, who she married, and I say my uncle, he's not my blood uncle, but that's who she had married. Like
Mm-hmm.
the job that he had in New York, this dude is the most um knowledgeable person about
Mm-hmm.
everything New York, right? And so
Okay.
he'd be like, yeah, right there's where John Lennon was shot. And then the 19 such and such that happened here. Oh, let me go. Come on, let's go meet X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean? Oh,
Uh-huh.
let's go down to Larry's and Jeff's bike shop. And then Larry and Jeff's bike shop, they built me, you know, my first bike that I had. And so I just had the great, I learned how to drive with this uncle. He took me up
Yeah.
to the Yonkers. We would ride our bikes once I got my bike from the Bronx down to Manhattan. It was just
A whole
fabulous,
new world.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And she is the one who taught me how to be a woman. She's the one that started that. I mean, she literally asked me one day, "Have you ever looked at your vagina?" I was like, "What?" I was appalled, right? It's appalled. I'm like, it almost took my breath away, right? What do you mean? And then she basically is like, it's yours. You
Yeah.
should. I want you to go in there right now and do it. And I was like, I mean, it was the hardest thing ever. But
Right.
after I did that, and then she said, painting nails and taking care of yourself and keeping your hair trimmed. And she had already known because, like I said, that's the one when I was 16 who actually came and got me and took me down to stay with my great grandmother and went through all my clothes and basically threw everything away,
Uh-huh.
shaved my hair, bought me new clothes. So that was a first introduction of kind of like someone teaching me how to care for myself and how to be a woman and the things I need to start thinking about and da 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 da. So, and to
Would you
this day,
go
I'm
as
great.
far to say that um did you did your relationship go to the point where maybe she was a mother figure or just an example of the woman you wanted to be?
Definitely the latter. I
Okay.
wouldn't say a mother figure because I don't think she knew how to be a mother. You know what I mean? So,
Mm.
and I say that because she didn't have any kids. And I think because she was very self-absorbed, shall I
Mm-hmm.
say?
Yeah.
I don't think she could have
She
done
didn't
that.
even
Now
have the
she would,
capacity to give a lot.
she could give, but I think she could only give so much, right? And then but she
Yeah.
would always say, you know what? She's like, of everybody, you're the closest to being like my child, right?
Hmm.
But I say that, and I think the reality is I'm the one who was around her most. So when she was in another part of so she lived in the Washington, D.C. area for a little bit. And we went to visit her. I know twice, but it was all of us. You know, it was
Hmm.
me, my brother, my other 2 cousins, and their sister. Um, and so we were all together, but I was the one who, especially when she went to New York, you know, there was sort of like this cadence, you know, every summer I'd go up, excuse me. And then she would also, every summer I would go up. And then when she was working in New Jersey during the summer, she ended up getting me my first ever job.
Mm-hmm.
was with her, you know, and I say with her, but she was on the top floor and I was on the bottom floor, but she basically got me a job in her building, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So there you go. She introduces me to the work environment, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, she just, when she passed, the sad thing about it was because she's so challenging, she basically ostracized herself from the entire family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when she passed, it was funny because, you know, another one of my cousins, you know, we talking to each other. I'm like, well, how do you feel about it? I was like, I don't know. How do you feel about it? We were both like, meh, you know, I'm
Yeah.
sorry she passed, and I'm sorry she passed that way, and I'm sorry she passed alone. But
Mm-hmm.
I really don't know her like that. And it was years. And so again, she ostracized herself from not only the family, but, you know, I want to say her ex. And then she would get upset because we all kept in touch with her ex, but he's wonderful, right?
Right.
And whatever went on between them had nothing to do with us.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I do mourn. I can say that I mourn the relationship that I should have and could have had with her, but that relationship never occurred because of her. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I really did at some point, I had to release her because it just got to the point where I mean it's and I'm not gonna go into it, but yeah, it was just really, lady. You know what I mean? Just yeah.
Yeah. Even
And I
before
felt
her
for her.
passing, you just had to kind of distance yourself a little bit.
I released her in and I say released, I released her in like 1992, I want to say.
Okay.
1992, and basically didn't. And so there was a period where, you know, she was struggling. It was in the latter half of her life, you know, because I'd still ask about her. She was still in touch with that one cousin I told you that I was close to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd ask, how's she doing? Okay, blah 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 blah, you know, and you know the family knows, and so I knew she was struggling. So when I went down, you know, God put it on my heart to give her some money, you know, and so but instead of giving it directly to her, I just gave an envelope to another relative who lived close to her. And I said, hey, and then listen, I try to be obedient, but I have to tell you that I was like, why? You know, why?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, don't do that. Nope. This is because it really was just put on my heart. Like it just came out of nowhere. And then
Mm-hmm.
and then it kept sitting on my heart. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. So I did that. And I told her, I said, hey, just give her the envelope. Please let her know there's no requirements. I'm not looking for anything in return, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards, she kept ringing my phone, right?
Right.
And you know me, and most people who know me. If I don't want to answer the phone, I'm not going to answer it. If
Right.
I'm not in the mood to talk, I won't pick it up. If I can't give you undivided attention, I won't pick it up. You know, and it just was, I was not really willing to open that door because you know what I still struggle with. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? I
Mm-hmm.
just don't have the capacity for what she comes with. And so she had called my the one cousin that we have both have in common and we keep in touch with. And that cousin who knows me well was like, well, you know, you don't I know I understand you don't know her well, but she's just not going to pick up the phone. She's not going to pick up the phone if she
Right.
doesn't want to, no matter how many times you call her, because again, I dictate how how I respond to that phone. That phone does not dictate to me, you know.
Right.
uh, and so eventually I sent her a text and I just acknowledged. I was like, hey, I recognize that you're calling. I said, I appreciate the call. I said, if it's about what I gave you, there was no requirements attached to that. And I said, and quite frankly, I said, you know, I'm really not in a space where I'm interested in communicating with you. And
Mm-hmm.
I left that. I said, I love you. You know, I hope you're well. And I just kind of left it. I left it at that. So, and she stopped calling
Mm-hmm.
because, of course, you know, when she was talking to my other cousin, it was like, well, I'm calling her, she ain't picking up the phone. I'm calling her, she ain't picking up the phone. Blah, 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 blah. You know, and I don't appreciate that. When you call me, if I don't pick up the phone, clearly I have something else going on.
Right.
You know, whoever you are, I recognize you didn't pick up the phone and call me back. And when I pick up the phone, okay, there I am. You know, But largely, many people, most people, I say most people, if you know me, you don't do that. You know what I mean? Because I don't do it to you. And I don't surround myself with people who would do that,
Hmm.
you know?
I'm just, and I thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. That gives a lot of background. Um, what strikes me as we've had conversations before is how mature. Now, you've already described why the maturity had to be accelerated, right? You were the only one you had to depend on primarily.
Mhm.
Um, and I think if I'm paraphrasing a bit, feel free to correct me, your escape from your environment at that point was to not be in the house, to be involved with sports, which I am um, interlinking with your education and focusing your priorities on sports and education. And at some time within that, prior to graduating from high school, you had already equated education and sports would be an escape out of the environment you're in. Did I summarize that correctly?
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. And I knew that I definitely wanted to go to college. Like I said, and I think, God, thank you. Lord Jesus, thank you.
And what put that on your heart, or what put that in your mind? What did going to college mean to you at that time?
It didn't mean anything. I just knew I loved school. I mean, and when I say
Okay.
I just knew I wanted to continue learning and you know me, you
Hmm.
'cause- and another friend of mine, she's like, oh my gosh, you like to know the minute details of everything. And
Hmm.
even back when I was in middle school, they called me, when I say they, my mother's friends, they called me, and I'm not going to put my name in there other than Beetle. They called me 50 question Beetle.
Yeah.
I wanted, and I am a sponge. I love learning. And my daughter said to me, she's like, Mom, you, she said, she said, you know a little bit about everything. She said, you know enough about, she's like, I was like, yeah, that's called the jack of all trades, a master of none, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but at some point, it's a cape and then it gets heavy and
Hmm.
then you can't carry it anymore. And then you want to peel that cape off. And so, I do remember being in a counseling session. I was like, I want to take this cape off, but when you don't have that soft place to fall, right? I don't have that network, and when I say that network, I don't have that immediate, you know me, I have to try to find rides to medical appointments,
Right.
you know?
Right.
I mean, I still to this day struggle to find a secure means to be able to do some of the basic things that I need to do. And don't get me wrong, I love my neighbors. My neighbors they're like the family that I created. Oh my gosh, they are
Right.
the greatest. But understand they have families too. And
Right.
so I can ask, but there's a high likelihood that they have. And then when I ask, most of the time it's someone who doesn't work, and there's not a lot of them these days.
Hmm.
And they will definitely try to accommodate me when they can, but there's just level of anxiety of not ever feeling covered. And that's what I can confidently say is that I've
Right.
never, you knew my husband, he didn't cover me. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? There
Yeah.
was no security or safety there. And so, you know, at this point in my life, even I can't tell you that I know what it feels like to be safe and protected and covered and confident that if I need X, Y, and Z, I know somebody can be there. I can't
Right.
say that with any certainty. So, and that's problematic. And in that, we say second, third, and fourth order effects. There are some second, third, and fourth order effects to that. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
so
How would you, now that you have some years and distance between having graduated from high school, when you look back, how would you describe your personality and temperament, and how did that play into your college choice and your college experience?
okay. So my personality was I'm gonna tell you, I was always just, how do I want to say? I went from introvert. to extrovert to now back to an introvert. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been a very honest person. I've always valued true friendships, honesty. Um, I've always valued my spiritual relationship with God, and I call myself a spiritual free agent. I don't think that I am religious. I'm spiritual, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I, even as a child, I've been like, I just honest. Like I didn't. Well, no, I can't say that. I can't say that. I did some things when I was younger for survival.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And and even when I did those, I didn't do it often, but I didn't feel good about it. And I
Mm-hmm.
stopped it as soon as I was like, okay, that's enough. Right. And
Right.
it's what everybody, and when I say everybody, it is what is commonly accepted to be done in communities like the ones that I grew up in with
Yeah.
people like us, our
Yeah.
folks, you know what I mean?
I do.
And so even if I went along with a group of folks and da 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 da, I'd kind of stand on the side and they'd be doing it to the nth degree, and I'm doing it to like a fraction of a degree. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and it just never felt good. But honestly, some of those things was like, Kim, I had to steal clothes to put on my back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
Without a responsive parent, you know,
yeah, I had to. I mean,
it
and I
was
didn't say I had to, but yeah, I mean, if I had to, oh gosh, yeah. I got my brother's hand-me-downs. He got new clothes, I got his hand-me-downs. That's how that worked. And then at some point, my mother's friend,
mm-hmm.
she started working for a thrift store that, was right outside the neighborhood, in what we call the white section, right?
Yeah.
Um, And so I remember her pulling me aside and telling me, you know what, anytime you want to come up to the thrift store, you can get a bag of clothes for free. I was like, okay. And then I would go up there. And that's when I started. And I actually had this wonderful sense of style
Mm-hmm.
that I
Yes,
didn't
you
know
do.
about. Yeah.
Yes, you do.
And it was uniquely me, right? And so, or it was mine. It wasn't something like I never was the one that could go to Gap or Forenza or the Spree outlet and be like, oh yeah, I want that off the mannequin. Like those type of things never kind of drew my attention. It was
Mm-hmm.
always like I would go to the thrift store and get like a two-piece men's suit, and then I'd have this Smurf blue shirt on underneath with some Smurf blue boots. And so I started at that point being able to at least play around with my own sense of style.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there was oh gosh, I was in, must have been, it was high school. It was early high school. And I remember a lady across the street, she was a grandmother to somebody who lived there. She would always be looking out the window. She called me over one day and she's like, come here for a second. She said, do you know I wake up every morning to see what you have on? I said, and as my daughters look, as she looks through some of my older clothes, or not my older clothes, my pictures from before I had kids, or when I was just pop, she's like, "Mom, look at you." She's like, "Oh my gosh, where is this?" And she's finding my clothes now. She's like, "Don't
Uh,
throw anything away ever. I need to go through it all." And she steals everything. And so even now it's very different,
yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I literally had to sometimes pick clothes to be able to put something on my back that looked like something other than some used boys whipped up pants and shirts and this and that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's yeah.
You know, in one of my other conversations I've had on some other episodes, I kind of was talking about and remembering how adversity can really build character. I mean, it's easy to say, it sounds cute and everything, but the reality of that is it's costly. You know,
Yes.
you
Yes.
I'm hearing and I have witnessed from you that you've essentially become an overachiever for trying to compensate for some negligence, some absenteeism. You know, you had to really go above and beyond just to survive. And that does carry over into other areas of your life, but again, at a cost. So, with this episode talking about trauma and therapy, when did you realize that perhaps you needed some therapy? Was it suggested to you, or did you just innately know that I need to speak with somebody? What was that turning point?
Yes. So I was in college. No one told me. I knew myself. And
Mm-hmm.
so as, as a recruited athlete, I'm playing, we're losing. As I told you, no one ever taught me how to work through emotions, how to
Mm-hmm.
identify an emotion, how to label it, where
Mm-hmm.
to put it, or anything to that effect. So, what I know is that we would lose, and sometimes I would be in a locker room throwing chairs against the wall, or looking looking at the one person who's always so happy. And I remember asking her, "Why the hell are you always laughing? What the fuck is so funny? Why are you so happy? Why are you so da 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 da?" And it's just like I was growly all the time, like this, "Arr," you know. And this is, and it's not who I wanted to be. I knew it was not who I was meant to be, because I knew that little person, that little beetle, was
Mm-hmm.
always just kind and gentle. You know what I mean? And then I think what happened was, because there was never an outlet for me, or never a way for me to process how I was feeling, and no one really truly sitting down and asking me how I was feeling. Um, and I will tell you that my mother's friend and my aunt that had me come up to New York, uh, they would always try to lift my head up, because my head was always down, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say anything to anybody. And if you asked me a question, I would just be really unusually quiet, and I couldn't establish eye contact with you, which is very different than the person that obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was in college, it was my second year in college. I was like, no, I just was like, this is not who I'm supposed to be. This is not, it doesn't feel good. I don't like it. Um, then I went and I self-referred myself to counseling, which was available at the school.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so since then I have been in counseling, and it has been wonderful. And that's how I've been able to kind of, what I want to say, I say have a happy life, right?
Mm-hmm.
A
Mm-hmm.
healthy, happy life to the greatest extent that I can potentially make it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I remember, and I remember, and I can see the counselor. I'm not gonna say her name, but I can see her face. I remember the sessions, and one of the first things she said to me was, "You have to learn to separate yourself from the decisions that your parents made."
Yeah.
And I passed that on, and I promise you, last week I said that to someone. I'm in a trauma focused Bible study group,
Uh-huh.
and we were having a little session. They came to the house, and it was so great. And that's one of the things that I put out there, because I had to keep reiterating that, you have to separate yourself from the decisions that your parents make. Separate yourself. So, because
Yeah.
I don't own that. It's not my responsibility. I didn't do that, and I didn't deserve that.
Right.
And I think, like, I want to say, when I was married, it was either my 30th or 35th birthday party. My husband had thrown like a surprise birthday party, and apparently my mother had said something to a friend that was there. It was a mate of a friend that was there, and that friend came in and was like, or that mate of the friend came in and was like, "I was talking to your mom, and she said that she really feels bad, because, she felt bad about the way she treated you. She never really gave you any attention. Da, 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 da." I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I just kept going to do what I don't know what I was doing. And I was like doing whatever else, went back to it. And she's like, "Well, aren't you going to go talk to her about it?" I'm like, "No, why?" Because to me, I mean, I just normalized it. It's just, it
Right.
was what it was. Right. And I think at that point, I just wasn't even interested in cracking open that egg. I just, like,
Yeah.
it was almost like, just leave me alone. Leave me
But
alone.
Was that more like self-preservation, or you were protecting yourself? Is that the shell that you had to put around yourself in order to uh just exist and have a healthy, happy life?
No, I think honestly, from a long time before then, it was hard for me to really be comfortable
Mm-hmm.
communicating with my mother. Like any kind of intimacy with my mother was very uncomfortable for me. Like if I left,
Yeah.
it would be a side hug and it would be quick and then I'm out the door. You know what I mean? And I will tell you, as a young child, I do remember coming in the house because I was silly, I'm still silly,
Mm-hmm.
but I was silly back then and it was just all shut down because I would come in the house and then I would try to hug, get away, it's too hot. Go back outside somewhere. Da 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 da. So then I got to the point
Oh,
where I couldn't really be comfortable touching her or hugging her or whatever. I'm grateful. And I will tell you this, God lifted all of that off of me when
yeah,
she was on her deathbed. And I just put my face against her face and I had some wonderful words with her and I kissed her and it felt natural. And it
yeah,
was, it was, I want to say it was freeing. You know what I mean? And so I am so grateful. And I still thank him for allowing me to have that time and that
mhm,
opportunity to do that because that was the first time that I ever was just like comfortable being kind of skin to skin with her. You know what I mean? Because I didn't
yeah,
know my mother. I did not. I mean, when it comes down to, I didn't know her. Um,
yeah.
you know, even at her funeral, somebody was her cousin who I would say knows the most about my mother's life and how she grew up because she lived with that cousin and that cousin's mother.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, yeah. And then she moved up to New Jersey with her. I said, when the hell did she live in New Jersey? And then she did it. What is that? Who? What? And I literally kind of just, I sat and I looked at the casket. I was like, I don't even think I don't know her like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. And don't, and I will say, my mother, I'm sure I don't know. I think it was almost to the point where my mother almost transitioned into this place where she wanted me to be the mother. You know what I mean?
She
Um,
she didn't she liked that you were self-sufficient and took control. She didn't want to.
well,
Maybe it was too much for her.
I don't know. I just think uh, I couldn't tell you. I can't tell you, but I can tell you
Yeah.
that, just like when I was in college and we have those drop ceilings with it's the false ceilings that have the little tiles and they're
Yeah.
very light. And
Hmm.
as we have the doors open to because where we went, we had to kind of keep the doors open
Yeah.
and the wind is flapping. And so these things are going up and down.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I'm in my bed and I go to stretch my leg and I feel something soft at the end of my bed. At the end of the bed is a cupboard, right? This tall dressing cupboard that you put your stuff in. So it should have been. I'm like, what the heck is that? I look down and one of my classmates was curled up at the edge of my bed, at the
Hmm.
back, on the bottom by my feet. And I'm like, what are you doing? I was like, hey, what are you doing? And I'm kind of sleepy. I hear noises. I don't know what it is. Is it okay if I stay? I'm like, yeah, whatever. Okay. And I have always gotten that, you make me feel safe. I'm 6 foot,
Oh,
whatever. You know what I mean? I can do it. And so I think the same thing with her is like, I was just always capable. And then I think, like you said, I think at some point, just like me, you want somebody to care for you. But
oh,
for
that's
me,
a
that
good
just,
point, Kim.
yeah,
That
I
that
just,
right there, the same thing that you needed was the same thing that she needed. Someone
yeah,
to care for her
yeah,
and
yeah,
help her. But
yeah,
it's unfortunate that, you know, as the daughter and under those circumstances, you would have to rise to that position.
yeah. And I couldn't, Kim. I was literally still trying to learn life and and
Yeah.
and grow up on my own, right? I'm like, I remember at one point, because I would again, she still didn't have a lot. So if I would clean out stuff or if I had clothes that I didn't want, and then if I happened to go visit, I would bring the stuff, right? I would
Hmm.
make that trip and I just load my cart with stuff. And then at one point, I think I didn't have time. So I didn't have anything. And
Yeah.
her comment was like, "Oh, you ain't bring me nothing." Da, 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 da. And I was like, "Hold on, wait a minute." I said, "First of all, let me help you understand. I am not obligated to do anything." I said, "What I would recommend you do is if I bring something, just be appreciative." And then I kind of went into this whole like, let me help you understand. Nobody helped me do anything. And then when I
Yeah.
did do something, no one supported me through it. So I don't owe anyone on this earth anything. And I
Yeah.
will say, until my uncle came along in my high school year, and he was the one for the first time ever when I went to college. It was the first time, one of my games where I could turn and I looked and I saw him. And that was the first time I had ever had anybody show up for me. And I love that man to pieces. He's deceased as well, but um, if I say I owe anybody something, it's him because you know he was the one who showed up for me in some sort of way, and he was sincere about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. In the first half of this episode, our guest, Beetle, shares her profound journey of growing up in a challenging environment marked by parental neglect, absent family support, and systemic obstacles. Raised in a broken home with an abusive, alcoholic father and a mother overwhelmed by her own struggles, Beetle learned early on to be self-reliant and resilient. Despite the lack of familial support, she found solace and hope through sports and education. Her academic and athletic achievements became her pathway to escape, earning multiple scholarships and becoming a standout student athlete. Beetle candidly discusses the emotional toll of growing up feeling invisible, with no one attending her school events or showing genuine interest in her life. The conversation explores her early experiences of emotional suppression, the challenge of not understanding or processing feelings, and her decision to seek counseling in college. She shares pivotal moments that shaped her understanding of self-worth and her determination to create a different life trajectory. Be sure to join us for next week's episode as we continue our conversation and delve deeper into Beetle's journey of healing, her approach to parenting, and how she consciously works to break generational cycles of trauma. Join us as we explore her experiences of marriage, motherhood, and the ongoing process of personal growth and self-discovery. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kim Michelle, and this is the Motherly Shift Podcast. See you next week.